Hello viewers, I am Nilima Shrivastava, Course Coordinator of Gender Sensitization, Society, Culture and Change. In today's video, we are going to talk about masculinities, concept and forms. In this video, we will talk about why it is so important to include masculinity in the course of gender sensitization. Then, by understanding masculinity, how can we understand that how gender sensitization can take place by including men in the discourses. Next, we will be defining how is masculinity defined. Construction of masculinity will be discussed in the later half of the video. Finally, we will be talking about forms of masculinity, and by the time you will know that there is not a single masculinity but varied kind of masculinities. And before we wind up this video, we will sum up the discussion in today's program. So let us start with knowing that what will be the learning outcomes of this video. After watching this video, you would be able to define and explain construction of masculinities, then discuss forms of masculinities and analyze their impact on men and women in different societies. Let's start our discussion with the need to talk about masculinity in the course of gender sensitization. By this time, you know that gender issues are not the issues related to women only. Femininity doesn't exist in isolation from masculinity. Also, that women's demand of equality, development and peace cannot be attained without active support of the men. By taking men into the fold of gender sensitization or women's empowerment, this would also free men of patriarchal shackles that constrict their own well-being. It is also important for men to understand and address gender issues as they not only affect women but affect men too. Gender issues also need to be understood in the context of how masculinity is constructed in any society. By change of societal and cultural scripts for masculinity and by changing notions of femininity, we can move towards a more gender just and gender sensitive society. So, I hope that you now understand that why masculinity assumes an important concept in the journey of gender sensitization and also in the discourses of women empowerment. Let us now introduce you to the concept of masculinity. You must have realized that boys and men learn appropriate gender roles and behaviors that are in agreement with masculine expectations of the society in which they perform or live. Boys from their early childhood get messages about what it means to be a boy. One can understand how gendering takes place by looking at the toys that are given to girls and boys to play. If one observes the games little boys and girls play, what roles do each of them take up, you will see it to be a natural extension of their gender roles that they see unfolding in the family and outside of it in the society. Let us now define masculinity. Masculinity is a noun form of masculine, which means having qualities or appearance traditionally associated with men. It has its root in the Latin word masculinus, meaning a male. If we look at the dictionary definition of masculinity, it is the quality of manliness, that is, habits, traits that society considers to be appropriate for a man. In other terms, masculinity refers to the roles, behavior and attributes that are associated with maleness and considered appropriate for men. By the same token, the term femininity refers to a society's ideas about the roles, behavior and attributes that are considered appropriate for women and associated with femaleness. In all societies, there are many ideas about masculinity and femininity that are harmful not only just to girls and women but also to boys and men as well as people of other gender identities. We can also say that masculinity is a set of social practices and cultural representations associated with being a man. The plural masculinities is used in recognition that ways of being a man and cultural representations of or about men vary both historically and culturally between societies and between groupings of men within one society. The feminist critique of masculinity is that women are considered as the other. Now let us move to understanding masculinity. As by now you know that gender identities are socio-culturally created and ascribed. Both masculinity and femininity are not biologically determined but are social constructs. Therefore, to understand masculinity, one has to look at femininity too. That is, masculinity cannot be understood without looking at the opposite construct, that is femininity. We can say that a woman or a girl is what a man or a boy is not, and of course vice versa. That is, masculine traits and qualities are opposites of feminine traits and qualities. If men are expected to be aggressive, controlling and hot-tempered, then women are expected to be submissive, meek, patient and docile. Do you see that? For one set of traits to function, the other set of traits should be accepting of them. That is, if one rules, then there should be someone to rule. And if one is superior, the other has to be inferior. What happens if the status quo of these masculine or feminine stereotypes are not adhered to? If a boy has a tendency to cry or is gentle in his behavior, he is called sissy. And if a girl is aggressive or commanding, she is labeled as manly. From an early stage, so we see that from an early age, children get messages that shape their personality into boys and girls. For Connell, gender is the end product of ongoing interpretations of the reproductive and sexual capacities of the human body. In this sense, masculinities as well as feminities are the effects of these interpretations on bodies, personalities and on any society's culture and institution. In Connell's account, in gender hierarchy of Western society, masculinities occupy a higher ranking than femininity. Arthur Brittain asserts that masculinity is always local and subject to change. What does not change is the justification and neutralization of male power or masculine ideologies. Let's now look at how masculinity is constructed, but by now you have also understood that there is no single construction of masculinity, and that is why we will now be talking about masculinities. Discourses on masculinity begins with the idea of male sex role, and according to sex role theory, boys are socialized to be masculine. They learn from messages transmitted by family, school and mass media and emulate stereotypes of manliness. Gender socialization, done through agents of gendering, validate masculinity constructs and also the femininity constructs. Masculinity constructs differ from one society to another. Masculinity is also not static in relation to time and geography. And since all men are not alike in terms of their caste, class, ethnicity, race, and even in sexual orientations, masculinity cannot be a monolithic construct and therefore has to be referred to as masculinities. Let's now talk about what is understood by gender socialization. Gendered socialization can be explained as the preference for boys and girls to be socialized differently. Boys are raised to follow male gender expectations and girls are supposed to conform to gender roles, behavior and actions appropriate for women. Society expects different attitudes and behavioral responses from boys as well as girls, leading to gendered socialization in any given society. Let us now also look at the agents of gendering. There are external sources called agents of gendering providing ideals or standard behavior or roles expected of each member in a given society. Family and friends, educational institutions, namely school, college and university, media, religion and other social, political and economic systems in society are all agents of gendering. They shape masculinity constructs for boys and men in their respective culture and society. Let us now learn about various forms of masculinity. Connell in 1995 discusses the following forms of masculinities, namely hegemonic masculinity, subordinated masculinity, complicit masculinity and marginalized masculinity. These forms of masculinity don't exist as a single form of masculinity. You may see them being hedged between two or more than two different types of masculinities. Let us learn more about hegemonic masculinity. Connell refers to it as a culturally authoritative form of masculinity that supports the dominance of men and the subordination of women, demanding total submission. Hegemony here refers to a social authority or supremacy attained in the organization of private life and cultural processes. It is also constructed in relation to various other masculinities that are affected by class, caste, race and sexuality. Although it is the dominant form of masculinity, but only a few men can actually meet the standards, necessitating emergence of multiple masculinities. Let us now understand subordinated masculinity. There are gender relations of dominance and subordination between groups of men too. For example, gay men are subordinated to straight men. Gay men face cultural and economic exclusion and are a target of street violence, workplace discrimination and personal boycotts. Such oppression makes homosexual masculinities come at the bottom of gender hierarchy among men. Gay masculinity is the most conspicuous, but it is not the only subordinated masculinity. Some heterosexual men and boys too are target of ridicule when abused as sissy, nerd, geek, mama's boy, etc., as they portray an impression of feminine traits. Complicit masculinity is the other form of masculinity that has been referred to by Connell. The number of men who practice hegemonic pattern of masculinity in totality, that is their behavior and attitude, is always very small in number in any society. Majority of men gain from this hegemonic form as a sort of spillover bonus. Here, there is no risk or fear of bearing the brunt of being in the forefront of hegemonic masculinity, but these men get the advantage indirectly. They are complicit in this masculinity since it helps them to draw upon the advantage men in general gain from overall subordination of women in society. Let us now talk about what is understood by marginalized masculinity. It is the interplay of gender with other structures such as class, race or caste that creates further hierarchical relationships among masculinities. It is a relational situation between the masculinities in dominant and subordinated classes, castes or ethnic groups. Let us now look at the role of media in construction of masculinities. Media is a significant gendering agent that reinforces the notion of both femininity and masculinity. Electronic media especially has a powerful influence in constructing notions of femininity and masculinity. It makes statements about what to wear, how to talk, and how to behave in the family, community, and the society at large. Our advertisements too reinforce gender stereotypes of masculinity and femininity. Male aggression and power is appreciated and idealized. For example, when a man rides a motorbike at high speed, in slush or up on the mountains, or he jumps from a high mountain or a building to demonstrate his toughness, he is shown as a winner. The disclaimer that is run before the advertisement is hardly noticeable, but the otherwise rough display of power is in the face of the viewer. Look at the serials or the soap operas that are aired on our television channels. The older men are shown as providers and protectors, while the young ones are seen indulging in violence in different forms and intensity, both with men and women. Watching these media images on TV, boys learn to accept these behavior and actions as a norm. Also, there are channels dedicated to showing wrestling all the time, and WWF is such a craze with young boys that they put up pin-ups in their rooms and also bash up weaker boys emulating their WWF heroes. Now to sum up, you can now say that masculinity is used to refer the characteristics of men. Also that the masculine traits like strength, force, aggression, etc. are related to manhood and manliness. The scholarly work on masculinities carried out in 1960s and 70s make scholars understand that the perceived and internalized attributes determine masculine identity. The cultural norms and values acquired through socialization processes may influence the acquiring of masculine characteristics like aggression, ambition, analytical ability and assertiveness. A scholarly paper written by Rowell Connell in 1979 discussed the social construction of different forms of masculinity. Connell further elaborated that the drive towards developing masculine attributes among boys and men is an important part of socialization process. To learn more about masculinities and also for looking at the references for this video, you may read Kamla Bhasin's book on exploring masculinity and also IGNOU's material of BGSE 001. Pilcher and Velleb have also written about masculinities in their book 50 Concepts in Gender Studies, and also look up some references on internet. So after watching this video, I hope you have understood the concept of masculinities. You can also now define masculinity and how different masculinities are formed in a given society, how gender socialization takes place, and what is the role of gendering media, what is the role of media and other gendering agents in construction of both masculinity and femininity. You would have also become acquainted with various forms of masculinity that you see in human society. I hope that after watching this video, your fundamentals and your understanding of masculinity and how it is constructed in various forms will be amply clear, and you can also now start looking for these forms of masculinities in and around you. Thank you for watching this video and see you later.